Hi, Elaine, Daisy. It's your Uncle Ari. How are you?
Good.
Welcome to week 2 of our current events class. I hope you've had a good week.
I have.
Good.
Especially with the opera. That was fun.
So, we're going to be talking about the U.S. Census today. And the first thing I want to ask is whether you had ever heard of the U.S. Census before this.
Well, we were at our grandma's house a while ago, and we never got to watch TV, and my parents and my mom let us watch a lot of TV.
Mhm.
So, we saw a lot of ads for the U.S. Census.
Oh, like TV ads for the U.S. Census.
My
And
mom
what
was
did they
helping
say?
my grandma out. My dad was at work, though. So
Uh-huh. And what did they say?
they said, sign up for the U.S. Census today, or something like that. I forget what, in a weird voice. La-di-da.
Daisy, had you ever heard of it?
Like now that I feel like I know the word, but now that you ask the question, I think like I've never actually heard of it, but I know exactly what it is. And that brings up another question. What Eli said is, why would they commercialize it? And I think I have an idea of the answer, but I just want to hear like other people's perspectives
You mean why would they put ads on television?
about the U.S. Census.
Yeah. What's your guess? Why do you think they might do that?
Maybe so more people participate and they get a like more realistic number.
That is exactly right. So tell me, I know you're just starting to learn about what the U.S. Census is, but why don't the two of you tell me your best understanding of what this is and why we do it?
Well, my understanding of it is it's a count of how many people there are, what gender they are, what race they are, what pretty much everything about them, their age, so you can know what they need and what they want, and the government can adjust what like the funding based on what they need. And like if they have everything they need right now, then we might lower the funding a bit or something like that.
Eli, that is a great description. Daisy, what's your understanding of what the census is?
The census is a way to count everyone. I think it's in one way therapeutic because it's saying that you count and you have the opportunity to be there, your information, your wants, your needs, and how you feel as a person, what gender you feel, what race you feel, and to know that you have the option to say like, no, thank you. It's just a count for other people to see how things are growing and changing too in the world.
You are exactly right, except for one little detail that I'm going to correct you on, okay? Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
You do not have the option to say no thank you. It is against the law not to participate in the census. Now, nobody's gone to jail in more than 50 years. Technically, if you don't participate or you lie on the census, they could fine you. That's really not likely to happen. But the law says everybody has to participate.
I meant
That's
like
how
if
important
you
it
didn't want to
is.
say your race. I meant like if you didn't want to say your race, because some people
right.
like
Yeah.
stand
So
up for
can I
that.
show you something that arrived in the mail at my house a couple weeks ago?
Sure.
And I've taken the personal information, I've covered up the personal information, so it's okay if I put this on YouTube. Do you know what this is? Can you read it?
It's your census thing.
Yeah,
And do you see what it says on this side?
Census 2020 United States. Shape your future. Start here.
So I opened it, and inside it gave me a specific ID number, which I covered it up just because I don't want everyone on the internet to see what mine was. And it told me to go on the internet and fill out the census online. And so I did that just this morning, and I did it for my whole household because one person per household does it. So I went and answered these questions that get asked just once every 10 years.
Wow.
Do you know if you've gotten this in the mail yet? Has this arrived at your house?
It has.
Yeah.
It
I don't
has.
remember when, but I think it was a week or two ago.
So do you know if your mom or dad went online and filled it out yet?
We have.
Uh-huh.
We have.
You have. I get the impression that somebody off screen is nodding their head, yes, we have.
Yeah.
So why is it important that once every 10 years, the country counts everyone. Why do we do this? Yeah, go ahead, Daisy.
I think it's to get an idea of people's head, how we grow and change. And I was also going to comment that when I was looking at the map, I was surprised at
This was in the background materials.
Because I thought it was like a too
I just
long
want to
time.
explain for people watching, when you say when you were looking at the map, you mean one of the background materials was a link to an interactive New York Times feature with a map of the United States where you could see based on census data how the country has changed. Sorry, go on. What were you saying?
Yeah. So, and I saw 2010, and I thought you gave me something that was like really old, and I was confused.
I did.
But then I remembered that it was 10 years ago.
When you were 1 year old.
That surprised me. Yeah.
Did you learn anything from exploring that map?
I thought it was really cool, like the colors and how they indicated like that there was a lot of people there. And like I started wondering, like, were these homeless people? Was there a lot of houses here? Like how does money affect? Like, do people have more money here? Do people have less money here? Is it medium? You know, stuff
Those
like
are
that.
all really important questions for understanding what the country looks like and who's in it and how the country is changing. And the best way to understand that is by doing this survey once every 10 years of everybody who's in the country. Eli, what's your thought about why we do this?
I think I said this a bit of this earlier, but I think it's because the government wants to know if they need to send less or more funding to different places and to different parts of that place. Like if they have really bad roads in some place and people have a lot of cars there, you need to fix the roads to make it convenient for people to get places. And like same with like grocery stores, if they need more, they'll send funding there.
That's all part of what the census helps us figure out. But there's something even more fundamental, which is the reason we do it. And the reason we do it is that it's in the Constitution. The Constitution tells us to do it. And I looked up that part of the Constitution. Do you want me to read it for you?
Sure.
Okay. It's Article 1, Section 2, and it says, "The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years of the first meeting of the Congress of the United States and within every subsequent term of 10 years. Enumeration is a big word. Do you know what enumeration means?
Not really.
Enumeration, can you just think about what's in the word enumeration that might give you a clue? What does enumeration sound like?
Like number?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Enumeration is basically counting. That's why in the video announcing this week's topic, I called it the big count, because this enumeration the Constitution says we have to do every 10 years is basically counting everybody in the country. And all of the things you said about federal funds and roads and bridges and schools is all true, but there's something else that is even more fundamental that the census determines. That is how many people in the US House of Representatives represent us, we the people who make up the United States of America. In the US Senate, every state gets 2 senators, but the House of Representatives is different. You know how the House of Representatives works?
Isn't it the bigger the state, the more people in the House of Representatives?
Exactly. It's not just size, and this is an important distinction, but it's the number of people in the state, the population. And this is kind of revolutionary because you think about when the country was founded, they could have said, the more money you have, the more representatives you will get in the House, or the more land you own, the more representatives you will get in the House. But they didn't say that. It wasn't about money or land or power. It was about how many people there are. And so people get representation in the US House of Representatives just based on their very existence in this country. And that's something that we only have a good account of because we do this US Census every 10 years.
Yeah.
So I gave you 3 things to look at. One was that map with information from the US Census 10 years ago. One was that video with the puppets. And one was that story about the census starting in that remote town in rural Alaska. Did you have any questions based on the background materials?
Yeah, I did, and I know some other people do too after we get finished with ours.
Eli, do you
Wait.
have a question about one of the background material items I had you read and listen to?
Was Toxic Bay the only place where they had to meet in person, or did they meet in person in a lot of places?
That's a really good question. The census goes in stages. So every household gets one of these. And it says, go online and fill out the census online. And then if you don't go online, they will send you a questionnaire to fill out. And you can fill out the questionnaire and send it back. And if you don't do that, then they'll start sending people door to door, house to house. And they actually hire workers all over the country who will all through the summer work doing just that, going door to door, house to house. And you can imagine that in especially far off rural places where maybe they don't have a lot of internet or they don't get a lot of mail, having that face-to-face interaction can be really important for getting an accurate count. Daisy, did you have any questions?
I was just going to say, I think that's a good point. For the Muppet video, I had 2 questions and I had some others for the others. My first one was, how do census takers get them the language they need and fast when they're door to door?
That's such a good question. I'll tell you, when I went online today to fill this out, at the bottom of the screen, there was a list of languages that I could click on to fill out the form in, it was literally more than a dozen languages, everything from Spanish to Russian to Vietnamese. And so I don't know specifically how they train the census workers to know which language is needed at which house, but I do know that they have workers that speak a lot of different languages. So that if I show up at your house and you speak German or Thai or Armenian, there will be somebody who can ask you the questions of the census in German or Thai and Armenian. And you can imagine it's a big challenge given all of the languages that are spoken in this country, but that's part of what the census does.
That's cool.
So one of the things that's been so exciting about these lessons is that a lot of other parents and grandparents and kids and their grandkids and other people who are doing school from home have joined in and watched the videos, and they submitted their own questions using the hashtag Shapiro School. And so we got some great questions in advance that I shared with you. Do you want to read some of the questions that other kids sent in?
Sure.
The first one is from Naomi and Micah, and it is, how long does the process take?
So the US Census Bureau has been working for a really long time, I mean years, on what the questions will be and how they're going to get all of the people to respond. And now we're kind of in the crunch time, right? There's something called Census Day, US Census Day, which is April 1st, which is like right around the corner. And that's the day that everybody is supposed to fill this out. But not everybody does on April 1st. So after that, those teams go out the way we talked about, going door to door, knocking on doors, and they gather all that information all summer long, and then they're supposed to submit all of that information by December, the end of the year. And then they take all of that information and then they will make it public in the year 2021. So we're talking about it being the 2020 census because we're counting all of these things in 2020, but we're not actually going to get the information until 2021. That's how big a project this is.
Wow. And I was going to say, why don't they just do it every year? And it's because it takes more than a year.
Well, and the other reason they don't do it every year is that the Constitution says do it every 10 years. You got to do what the Constitution says. You want to offer another question? Daisy, I think you've got one.
Sure. Josephine asked at the age of 10, why wouldn't anyone fill out the census? Don't they want money for like their schools and roads?
That's a great question. And people should want to fill out the census because it will provide their community money for things like schools and roads. But I want to tell you about an interesting controversy that took place over the last year or so. The Trump administration wanted to add a question to the US Census. And that question would be, is this person in this house a citizen of the United States? And there was a big fight over whether that question should be in the census. Can you guess why or imagine why there might be a fight over that?
Because some people feel like they belong in America even though they don't, and they might not want to share that information, maybe?
And it will create a lot of people who would have to go to prison if they didn't want to share that information.
Well, imagine if you are an undocumented immigrant and you are in the United States. And as a person in the United States, you're supposed to be counted in the census, whether or not you have citizenship, whether or not you are in the country legally. And if you get the census form, and one of the questions on the census is, are you a legal resident of the United States? I may have had the language wrong. It might have been legal resident, it might have been citizen. I don't have the language in front of me right now. But you could imagine that somebody getting that question might say, I don't think I want to fill out this census form because undocumented immigrants are being deported, they're being arrested. I think maybe I shouldn't fill this out. You can imagine why that might scare people away from filling out the form. And then we wouldn't get the most accurate count of who is in the country, because the census is supposed to count everybody in the country. And so this went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said you cannot include this question on the census because it is going to have too large of an effect. It's going to make too many people decide not to participate in this big count, and then we won't have an accurate number. And so the reason I bring that up is that Josephine asked the question, why wouldn't anyone fill out the census? Don't they want money for schools and roads? And of course, they should want money for schools and roads, but you could imagine that if people are feeling suspicious and they're feeling afraid, and maybe they feel like they don't belong, that those people might not want to give all of that information to the federal government. And so ultimately, the Supreme Court said that question that might make people feel suspicious and afraid who are not in the country legally, that question couldn't be on the census. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, there was one more. I think we kind of answered this, but it's from Marisa Howe. What happens if you don't tell the truth?
Well, I mean, we touched on this a little bit, but you're right. I mean, it says, I want to show you, can you see this part of the envelope right here?
Your response is required by law.
Bum, bum, bum.
Dun, dun.
Sounds very serious, right? Well, your response is required by law. But if you don't respond, you're probably not going to get fined, and you're almost definitely not going to go to prison. But the fact that it says this on the envelope tells you just how important this is and why everybody really does need to participate. That video that I had you watch had some complicated words in it. We talked about enumeration, but you want to talk about some of the other words that were in there because they're key to what the census does. Had you ever heard the word apportionment before?
Yes, in the video I sang.
In the video?
Yeah, I kind of forgot what all the words meant and all the words they mentioned.
They were kind of fast going.
Yeah,
They were
I worked on Monday.
That's why we're here to talk about it. Okay, so just like enumeration sounds like the word number and has something to do with numbers, what does the word apportionment sound like to you? When you think about what's in that word, what'd you say, Eli?
Portion.
Like a portion.
A portion.
Exactly. So if you have the whole pie of things that you're going to give out all over the country, what do you think apportionment means?
Giving everybody a portion of the pie.
Exactly. So who gets a big piece? Who gets a small piece? Who gets a medium-sized piece? That's apportionment. And what does that have to do with the U.S. Census?
The House of Representatives, maybe?
That,
Something like that?
and
Or
also
getting everyone what they want.
giving everyone enough money for the schools and the roads and the other things that the federal government provides.
Definitely.
There was also the phrase federal funds for infrastructure. Do you know what infrastructure is?
Isn't it like how your country works or something?
Kind of. Let's think about that word again. What do you hear in the word infrastructure that might sound familiar to you?
Structure.
Structure, right. So infrastructure is all of the things that make the country work, like roads and bridges and all of the other ways that we manage to connect our cities and states to each other and facilitate all of the things that we have to do every day.
Yeah.
And that comes out of what we learned from the census.
Can we ask
Yeah.
a few more questions?
Absolutely. What other questions do you have?
Eli, do you want to ask one of mine of the census now?
Oh, sure. Do you personally think the numbers will increase or decrease or stay the same?
Well, I think the population of the United States has been growing, but I don't know how fast it's been growing, and that's something that the census will tell us. But oh, sorry, go on, yeah?
But I think I meant like, do you think the races will grow? Like certain races will, the population of certain races and will shrink or grow?
Yeah,
or,
so
like,
we
are more
know
elder people coming? Or?
we know that the country is becoming more diverse and that the populations of people of color are growing faster than the populations of white people. And certain parts of the country are already what we call majority minority, which means that when you combine African Americans and Latinos and Asian Americans, you get more than 50% of the total population of that part of the country. Now, there are forecasts about when the entire United States will be majority minority, but the census will give us much more detailed information about what's happening in Seattle, where you live, what's happening in Washington, D.C., where I live, and what's happening in the country as a whole. So we've talked a lot about how this is useful for the federal government, but can you think of ways that it would be useful for other people who might benefit from this information?
Mayors, maybe.
Mayors, sure. I mean, that's local government, yeah.
Adding on to Eli's, maybe people that are like poor, they may benefit because, or like kind of the towns being poor, then they'll realize it and then they'll fix the roads, fix the schools, and try to make their life more easygoing.
What if you're a company that owns shopping malls and you're trying to figure out where to open your next shopping mall? Do you think census information would be helpful in figuring that out?
Yeah, I agree.
A lot of people.
I agree with Eli. If you put in a place with a lot of people, then you have a higher chance of getting more customers.
What if you're a school with an English language learner program and you're trying to figure out how to hire teachers and what other languages those teachers should speak in order to best educate the students who might show up without knowing very much English? Do you think the information would be helpful with that?
Yeah, I know somebody who just came into our school who didn't speak any English, but she met somebody who spoke both Korean and English, and it was awesome, and it was so cool to see, and she translated for her, and it was nice.
So having a detailed understanding of what's happening in your community can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions about the U.S. Census?
I have one about the article, and I said since a lot of people wanted to survey in the area because they didn't want it before, like, I guess this is for you, Eli, how much do you think the numbers will increase? Because it was close to zero because nobody really wanted to do this survey because the tribesperson wasn't. But now since the tribesperson wants to, then it kind of lifts up the numbers. How much will increase?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh. I don't know. Maybe I have two guesses. Either like just a couple hundred, or like I think it'll be like a couple hundred, like maybe 1,000 or so. Cool.
Don't you think there's something amazing about a country of more than 300 million people saying it's important that we know exactly who is in this tiny remote village of just a couple hundred people, that those people matter too, even if they're not in some big metropolis or in the middle of a bustling city on an interstate with a big airport, that even in that tiny village in a faraway corner of this country, people still count.
Yeah.
And that's really cool that people believe that.
Yeah.
Well, it's been so fun talking to you about the U.S. Census. Thanks for joining me for the second week of our current events class. Do you have any last questions before we say goodbye?
No, do you?
Is there any deadline for when the census ends, or is it just it should be done by December and it should be out in 2021, like January or February?
You know, there's an interesting question happening right now because the coronavirus has delayed the timeline for people being able to go to house and do interviews. And so there are deadlines, but now things are being delayed. And so there's a question about whether those deadlines can be pushed back or not. And that's a question that we're going to have to wait and see the answer to.
Yeah, maybe a year.
Good question.
That was a really good question, Eli. Well, I want to thank both of you and also everybody at home who's been watching with their own kids and grandkids and nieces and nephews. We're going to have another current events class next week. And also we have so many more lessons lined up with other teachers that I'm really excited for you to see. And you can join in our conversation on Twitter with the hashtag Shapiro School. I hope you have a great week. It's been great talking to you.